Welcome to Let Jesus Be Your Doctor, the true path to healing for body and soul.
What if holding a grudge isn't just, an internal emotional struggle?
Right.
Like, what if it isn't just this heavy, jagged stone you carry around in your pocket, as the old cliche goes? We often talk about resentment as this feeling that simply sits inside us, maybe making us a bit bitter, but ultimately remaining private.
Yeah, we treat it like a static object.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But what if, instead of a static stone, a grudge is more like a short circuit in a house? What if you were drawing massive, unsustainable amounts of energy to keep a resentment actively humming? Which means the lights are dimming in every other room of your life.
Wow, that's a powerful image.
And what if this invisible, let's call it spiritual physics equation, is actively drawing darkness toward you and quite literally making you physically sick?
That's the profound and really sobering reality we are stepping into today. When we view unresolved pain merely as a psychological issue, we completely miss the vast invisible landscape of what is actually happening.
Right.
Resentment is not passive. It's an active, vibrating frequency. And it alters the spiritual atmosphere around us in ways that can be, deeply destructive to our own souls.
Welcome to this deep dive. Today we are inviting you to slow down. We're intentionally shifting the pace, taking a breath, and stepping into a space of quiet reflection.
Yes, just taking a moment to breathe.
Our mission today is to explore the deeply challenging yet radically liberating mechanics of spiritual healing. We're going to be unpacking the profound writings of the Christian mystic Bertha Dudd, specifically centering on her Revelation 5:4-28.
And we'll be looking at that alongside some really beautiful contemplative insights from healers and teachers like Bruno Groening, Derek Prince, Louisa Picaretta, and Thomas A. Kempis.
Right. This is a journey that requires a certain stillness from you, the listener, because we are talking about the heaviest burdens you carry in your heart.
And it's crucial to recognize that these burdens, they aren't just the lingering pain of what other people have done to you.
Yeah, that's the hard part.
It really is. They are also the quiet, gnawing guilt of your own failures. The times you fell short, the things you neglected to do.
But the core premise we want to anchor you in today, before we ask anything difficult of you, is simply this: God does not condemn you.
Absolutely not.
God is not sitting on some throne of harsh judgment, tallying up your wounds or your missteps. Rather, he is constantly gently inviting you to open your heart to grace. Because in the profound love that chooses to forgive, absolutely everything can heal.
Beautifully said. And to understand the mechanics of that healing, to understand really why forgiveness is the absolute prerequisite for it, we have to examine the invisible reality of our thoughts.
The spiritual physics.
Right, the spiritual physics of hostility, as Bertha Dudd describes it.
I actually want to read directly from Revelation 5:4-28 right now, just so we can let these exact words settle into our mind.
Please do.
Dude writes, "You shall love your neighbor as yourself. You shall not bear any guilt of sin against him." She explains that a hostile thought cannot awaken mutual love, but rather the love you show to an enemy actually awakens positive stirrings within them.
And she doesn't frame this as just, a nice moral idea.
No, not at all. She describes our thoughts as having a literal geographic trajectory.
Yes. She totally strips away the illusion that our minds are these sealed private vaults.
Listen to this chilling line from the Revelation. It says, "Every bad thought directed at a person is absorbed by evil forces and transferred to them."
That is heavy.
It is. And let me just pause and push back on this a little, because it sounds incredibly daunting. Are we saying that if someone wrongs me and I'm sitting quietly in my room, totally alone, feeling angry about what they did, I am somehow polluting the spiritual atmosphere?
I know,
It feels a bit like victim blaming, doesn't it? Like, if I'm the one who was hurt, why am I responsible for evil forces absorbing my thoughts?
I completely understand why it feels that way. But we have to remove the human concept of blame here and look at it simply as the mechanics of the universe.
Okay, what do you mean by mechanics?
Well, think about gravity. Gravity doesn't care whose fault it is if you fall off a ledge, right? It simply operates. The spiritual realm operates on the law of resonance. The text tells us that evil only breeds evil.
So it's about what you're tuning into.
Exactly. When you are wronged, a wound is opened. But when you respond to that wound by generating hostile thoughts, You are basically tuning your spiritual frequency to the exact same wavelength as the darkness that hurt you.
Oh, wow. You're matching the vibration of the offense.
Precisely. And because you're broadcasting on that exact frequency, your hostility doesn't just, sit in the ether. It acts like a beacon.
So it draws things to it.
Yes, it is actively absorbed by dark spiritual forces, amplified, and then transferred to the person you are angry with, which then, of course, triggers a hostile response in them.
It's a closed-loop system of spiritual destruction.
It really is. You are rapidly multiplying the power of evil in the world, and it actively harms both the sender and the receiver.
So keeping a grudge is literally participating in the expansion of darkness. I mean, you become a relay station for the very forces that caused your pain in the first place.
Which is exactly why Dud's solution is so demanding. If harboring ill will literally multiplies darkness in this invisible realm, you can't simply wait for the other person to apologize.
You have to act.
You have to actively break the circuit.
And the way to break that circuit is the radical act of blessing your enemies. But I want to clarify what radical means here, because our standard human definition of forgiveness is usually, wildly insufficient.
Oh, definitely. We tend to think we are doing the Christian thing if we simply stop actively plotting revenge.
Right. There's this brilliant reflection on this idea in our materials. Someone noted, I thought it would be enough if I didn't wish my enemies the plague or cholera.
We all do that. We think neutrality is forgiveness. We think, I won't actively try to ruin their life. I'll just ignore them, freeze them out, and quietly harbor my resentment.
We think a vacuum is the same thing as peace.
But neutrality doesn't stop the radio transmitter. If the circuit is still plugged in, the static is still humming.
That makes so much sense. Listen to the mandate Dud records in Revelation 5:4-28. This is the actual mechanism of transformation. She says, you should counter evil with good, to weaken and transform to good what is evil. You shall send out good thoughts and wish your enemies only well. Thereby you chase away the bad forces.
Notice the active verbs there. Counter, transform, send out, chase away.
It's very intentional work.
It is. True forgiveness in this mystical framework means you must reach a point where you allow only loving thoughts toward an enemy. You must actively include them in your prayers.
Dud explicitly states, good thoughts act as a redeemer. They soothe resentment and hate.
And a redeemer is a saving force. Your act of blessing literally dismantles the dark energy that was previously built up. You aren't just ignoring the darkness, you are shining a light so bright that the darkness ceases to exist.
But, what if we refuse? What if the pain is just too much and we insist on maintaining our enmity? The revelation offers a climactic, almost terrifying warning here. It acts as a divine mirror.
Yeah, this part is sobering.
The text continues. Therefore, you shall only find forgiveness with me when you have also forgiven your debtors. For how can I be mild to you who still judge strictly and have enemies, because you yourselves maintain the enmity?
It's crucial to understand the mechanism here, though. This isn't God acting petty.
Right. It's not a punishment.
No, it's not God saying, well, you didn't forgive, so I'm going to withhold my grace to punish you.
Then what is happening? Why can't we receive forgiveness if we haven't given it?
Because of the shape of your heart. When you judge someone strictly, when you maintain enmity, your heart clenches tightly around that judgment. It becomes rigid, sealed shut like a closed fist.
A closed fist.
God is constantly pouring out grace. His mildness is always flowing, but a closed fist physically cannot receive water. You have sealed your own vessel shut by the strictness of your own judgment.
So to mirror God's heart is the only way to be open to God's grace.
Exactly.
Okay, so if true forgiveness and radical blessing open the fist, if they clear out that spiritual static, well, nature abhors a vacuum. Something has to rush in to fill that newly emptied space.
And that is exactly where the divine healing stream enters.
Back in the 1950s, the renowned German healer Bruno Groening actually observed this physical and spiritual phenomenon constantly. He taught that a person with true compassion stands incredibly close to God.
Yes, very close.
In fact, by loving others, that person becomes a literal tool and instrument of the divine.
Compassion is the force that heals specifically because it removes the spiritual wall between us and others. It ends the separation.
Hostility that transferred those evil forces that created the wall.
Right, it created a chasm, a rigid boundary of us versus them. Compassion dissolves that boundary entirely.
This is deeply anchored in Scripture too, specifically Ephesians chapter 4, verse 32. Be kind and compassionate to one another, forgiving each other, just as in Christ God forgave you.
It's a core instruction.
But I want to dig into the physical reality of this. We've established the spiritual physics. But our texts mention that forgiveness opens the, quote, closed stream of life. Does this mean that our actual physical ailments, our chronic pain, our inflammation, our deep spiritual depressions are directly caused by our refusal to forgive?
The contemplative tradition and increasingly actually modern observations of the nervous system heavily affirm this.
Really? The nervous system?
Yes. When you refuse to forgive, your entire being is in a state of spiritual tension. You are sitting on a self-made throne, playing the role of the judge. You are bracing for an attack, holding on to the offense to protect yourself.
And that takes a physical toll.
A massive one. That chronic spiritual rigidity manifests as physical restriction. It closes the stream of life.
It's like crimping a garden hose. The water is there, but it can't flow.
That's a perfect analogy. When you step out of judgment and into grace, that spiritual tension releases. The heart softens and yields. And it is only in that softened state that the Holy Spirit, which is the literal stream of life, can actively work, flowing into your physical and spiritual being, untangling the knots that cause illness.
Okay, conceptually that is beautiful. I think everyone listening recognizes the deep truth in that. But we have to ground this in reality, because real life is messy and it's agonizing.
It is.
What happens when someone has done something to you that is so profoundly damaging, so abusive or betraying, that forgiveness feels literally impossible to muster as an emotion?
That is where the rubber meets the road, isn't it? How do we execute forgiveness when every fiber of our being is just screaming in pain and the trauma is still echoing in our bodies?
The teachings of Derek Prince offer a really challenging yet incredibly practical answer here. He taught that forgiveness is the vital bridge over which God's healing stream flows into our lives, reaffirming that unresolved wounds often manifest directly as physical or mental illness.
But he adds a crucial distinction.
Yes, here is the friction. Prince insisted that forgiveness is fundamentally an act of obedience, not a feeling. Wait, does that mean I can choose to forgive someone? I can speak those words, even if my emotions are entirely opposed to it? Even if I am still trembling with anger?
Yes, you can. And we really need to understand why this isn't just, faking it or spiritual bypassing.
Because that's what it sounds like at first.
Right. We often wait for this warm, peaceful feeling of forgiveness to wash over us before we are willing to speak the words. But that feeling almost never comes while we are still gripping the offense.
You can't feel peaceful while you're holding a weapon.
Exactly. Forgiving doesn't mean you suddenly feel affectionate toward the person who destroyed your life.
Then what is the actual mechanism of obedience here? If it's not a feeling, what am I doing?
It is an administrative handover. It's a transfer of jurisdiction.
Jurisdiction. Okay, explain that.
When you forgive in obedience, you are resigning from your self-appointed position as the judge. You are saying, God, this person owes a massive, unpayable debt for what they did to me. The injustice is entirely real.
So you aren't pretending it didn't hurt.
Never. You're acknowledging the reality of the debt, but you follow it by saying, I am no longer strong enough to collect it, and trying to collect it is destroying me, so I am legally handing the collection of that debt and the judgment of that soul entirely over to you.
You are stepping off the throne.
You are. It is an act of sheer will and obedience to divine law, executed right in the presence of your pain. And the promise of this spiritual mechanic is that when you hand over the jurisdiction, God's perfect justice is what ultimately transforms your bitter, lingering emotions into peace.
The obedience must come first. The emotional healing follows the obedience.
Always.
That structural understanding leads perfectly into the mystical vision provided by Louisa Piccarreta. She offers this incredibly beautiful, breathtaking glimpse into what happens in the unseen realm in that exact moment of painful obedience.
Her writings on this are just extraordinary.
They really are. She observed that when a soul makes that agonizing choice to forgive, when they hand over the judgment, even through their own tears, Jesus himself actually performs the act of forgiveness within her.
Let's just sit with the magnitude of that for a second.
Yeah.
What does it actually mean to have Jesus forgive within you? It implies a profound mystical union. You are not doing the heavy lifting of forgiving a devastating betrayal using your own finite, fragile human psychology.
Which is such a relief because we usually can't.
We can't. When you say, I forgive, you are simply opening the valve. You are opening the door for Christ's perfect, infinite, cosmic capacity to forgive, to operate through your humanity.
Your heart literally becomes a vessel for divine action.
Yes. And the implications of this change everything about how we view our pain. When your suffering is paired with this divine act of forgiveness, it becomes compassion, in the truest original sense of the word.
Kumpas.
Exactly. Which means suffering with. Your pain stops being a meaningless tragedy. It becomes a sanctifying force. It doesn't just heal your own localized heart. It pours divine mercy out over the world. Your hard-won obedience becomes a literal conduit for universal grace.
It's the ultimate alchemy, isn't it? It turns our deepest, most jagged wounds into well springs of healing for other souls.
It's miraculous.
So if we accept that this monumental cosmic shift happens when we surrender our judgment, how do we actually practice this on a random Tuesday?
Right, in the mundane moment.
Yeah, how do you, the listener, apply this to the daily irritations? The coworker who undermines you, the family member who casually reopens an old wound?
We have to shrink the cosmic down into the daily, quiet walk with God. And this is where the classic wisdom of Thomas à Kempis becomes a literal lifeline.
In his masterful work, The Imitation of Christ, à Kempis is incredibly blunt. He states that without learning to forgive others, we will never, ever find inner peace.
À Kempis understood the microscopic details of the inner life so well. He introduces this concept of silent forbearance toward the faults of others.
Silent forbearance.
Yes. He doesn't promise that people will suddenly become perfect. People will constantly irritate you, let you down, or actively wrong you. The spiritual atmosphere is full of that static.
So what does silent forbearance actually look like? Does it mean just being a doormat? Just letting people walk all over you?
Not at all. It is an active internal purification. It means enduring the faults of others silently, without gossiping about them, without snapping back in retaliation, without mentally rehearsing how wrong they are.
Oh, the mental rehearsing. We all do that.
We do. But he views this discipline of stopping that rehearsal as a school of love.
A school of love. That reframes the annoyance completely. The person irritating you isn't an obstacle to your peace. They are the curriculum.
Precisely. It actively purifies the heart. He calls humble gentleness the true medicine of the soul. When you can look at the person who is causing you pain, and instead of seeing an adversary you need to defeat, you see them in the light of grace.
As a fellow traveler.
Right. Simply as a fragile, flawed child of God who is stumbling blindly along their own difficult journey, your pain stops being a weapon. It is transformed into understanding.
And when pain becomes understanding, the divine love can flow freely once again. I want to invite you right now, wherever you're listening to this, to slow down even further.
Let's just take a breath.
Let's actively practice this mechanism together. Let's walk through the meditation offered in our text.
Just listen to the cadence of these instructions and let them settle deep into your spirit.
I invite you to examine what you are holding on to today. What is that short circuit in your soul? Is it a sharp recent disappointment? A dull, aching grudge that has been humming in the background for years? A fresh, agonizing pain from a betrayal?
Whatever it is, bring it to mind.
Close your eyes for a moment if you can. Breathe in deeply and breathe out slowly. Bring your focus entirely to your heart, that very space where your deepest love and your deepest pain constantly intersect. I want you to imagine a gentle light kindling right there in the center of your chest.
A very warm, peaceful light.
A light that is incredibly warm, completely pure. And as that light glows, silently say to yourself with your will, even if your emotions resist, I forgive and I bless. I open my heart for compassion.
Let the obedience guide the words.
Imagine that light growing larger, extending past your own physical body. Imagine it reaching out and touching everyone, even and especially those who have hurt you. You are releasing the jurisdiction. You are free. And in this moment of radical blessing, they are free too.
That is the exact moment the spiritual blockage dissolves. The stream of life rushes in. But, to ensure that the space remains open, to ensure the spiritual static doesn't immediately return, we are given one final essential key.
Gratitude.
Yes, gratitude. How does gratitude function as a mechanism here, like structurally? Gratitude acts upon the human heart the exact same way sunlight acts upon a closed blossom. When you consciously identify things to be thankful for, you are basically forcing your spiritual frequency to remain tuned to grace.
You're locking the dial in place.
Exactly. The text tells us to think of 3 small things we can be grateful for today. They do not have to be grand, parting the Red Sea miracles.
Just everyday things.
A friendly word from a stranger. The specific way the morning light hit the dust on your window. The simple, rhythmic breath that is carrying you through this very moment. Naming these things gently completely opens the heart, allowing God's grace to flow through you like a quiet, radiant river of light.
It's the practice of whispering, thank you, Lord, for this life. Thank you for everything you give me, even for what I do not yet understand. It's about feeling the literal warmth pull into your chest, making your vision clearer and your nervous system more peaceful.
Remaining in that silent awe, that gentle submission, is where true, lasting healing resides.
We've covered such profound ground today in this deep dive. We started by looking at the terrifying reality that our thoughts carry immense spiritual weight, that hostile thoughts are absorbed by dark forces and literally transferred to others, multiplying evil in the world.
The spiritual physics of it all.
Yes. We learned from Bertha Dudd that radical blessing, actively sending out good thoughts, is the only mechanism that can transform and chase away that static.
We explored how choosing the hard administrative obedience of forgiveness, even before the feelings arrive, allows Jesus to perform the act of forgiveness within us, turning our softened hearts into open conduits for the divine healing stream.
And we learned that this daily practice of silent forbearance and gratitude is the true medicine of our souls, capable of untangling the spiritual knots that cause us physical and mental anguish.
It's a complete transformation of how we live.
Before we leave you today, before you step back into the noise and the friction of your daily life, we want to give you one final thought to carry with you into the quiet.
We have spent this entire time talking extensively about how your forgiveness releases others, how it stops the transmission of evil forces, and how it allows God's healing stream to finally enter your own life.
Right.
But consider this carefully. What if the person you are withholding the most grace from, the person whose mistakes you judge the most strictly, the person you view with the least amount of mercy, is actually yourself?
Wow. What if you were the one maintaining the enmity against your own soul?
If Jesus is willing, as Louisa Picaretta saw, to step in and perform the miraculous act of forgiveness within your soul toward your worst enemies, are you willing to step off the throne of judgment, open your own tightly clenched hands, drop the heavy weight of your own past failures, and let his healing stream wash over you?
Something to truly meditate on. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Take a deep breath, walk gently in grace, and we'll see you next time.